Well, the focus was about strengthening bilateral relationships, okay? Provide opportunities for each other and explore several areas of...
What kind of deal can redraw borders, fuel economies, and reshape security, all in just 48 hours? Niger and Chad have just signed it, shocking even those who thought they had seen everything in Sahel politics. Fuel, trade, military action, and open borders, all locked in at once. But why is diesel fuel, of all things, the thread tying it all together? Let's find that out. In the dusty corridors of Niamey's presidential palace, the kind of handshake that history remembers was exchanged. Over a mere 48 hours, Niger and Chad's leaders signed a pact whose scope defies the usual measured pace of African diplomacy. No long-winded summit declarations, no endless committees that stretch into oblivion. This was swift, surgical, and aimed squarely at reshaping the balance of power in a region where the rules are often written by forces far beyond its borders. The visit itself was historic. Chadian President Mahamat Idris Deby did not arrive in Niger for ceremonial gestures or symbolic photos. He came with an agenda and left with a blueprint. Within 2 days, both governments had committed to a list of actions that touched nearly every lever of state power: defense coordination, trade facilitation, digital connectivity, infrastructure building, and crucially, the removal of barriers between their people. This wasn't a single-issue deal, it was a re-engineering of their bilateral relationship. One of the pact's most significant political moves is the revival of the Niger-Chad Grand Joint Commission. Dormant for years, it is being reactivated as the nerve center for implementing and policing this new partnership. Its role will be to make sure that what was agreed in the heat of this diplomatic moment survives the grind of governance. The Commission will monitor project timelines, iron out disputes before they escalate, and coordinate policies so that both capitals speak with one voice in regional forums. In a Sahel often fractured by competing alliances and shifting loyalties, such institutional unity is rare and powerful. Beyond institutional ties, the agreement reaches deep into the human layer of bilateral relations. The decision to grant visa exemptions for citizens traveling between the two countries is more than a bureaucratic tweak. It represents a conscious dismantling of one of the region's most persistent barriers: mobility. Traders who once faced weeks of delays at border crossings will now move freely. Students can cross for education without the weight of administrative hurdles. Families split across the border will see each other without months of paperwork. By removing these barriers, Niamey and N'Djamena are turning their frontier from a checkpoint into a corridor. The pact also stretches into the digital and infrastructural future. Agreements were signed to fast-track fiber optic interconnection, a move that will allow both nations to tap into more stable, high-speed internet, connect government systems more efficiently, and give entrepreneurs in even the most remote corners access to digital markets. Paired with commitments to advance the Salkadamna energy project and the Trans-Saharan Highway, the two countries are betting on a vision where asphalt and fiber lines carry prosperity as effectively as oil pipelines carry fuel. On the security front, the pact makes no secret of its ambition: coordinated defense operations against insurgency in the Sahel and Lake Chad basin. The details are deliberately sparse, but the intent is clear: joint patrols, intelligence sharing, and the creation of legal frameworks that leave fewer gaps for militant groups to exploit. This is not just about military might. It is about denying insurgents the space, both geographical and legal, to operate. Taken together, this agreement is an exercise in both urgency and foresight. Urgency, because the Sahel cannot afford to let instability, economic stagnation, and foreign dependency dictate its fate. Foresight, because each clause in the pact appears designed not only to address immediate needs, but to anchor both nations to a shared long-term trajectory. Yet, within this sweeping vision, one thread stands out as both surprising and strategic: the central role of diesel fuel in the pact's structure. Why would something as specific as fuel supply be the hinge on which so many broader ambitions turn? When Niger and Chad put pen to paper on this new partnership, it wasn't the border policy or the infrastructure promises that took center stage in the fine print. It was energy. Specifically, a diesel supply agreement that might seem straightforward on the surface, but in the geopolitics of the Sahel is anything but simple. This one clause may be the keystone holding the rest of the pact together. Diesel in Chad is not just fuel, it is lifeblood. From powering irrigation pumps in rural farmlands to keeping military vehicles operational along volatile borders, diesel runs through every vein of the country's economic and security systems. But Chad's supply has long been a fragile chain. Imports are costly, transport routes are vulnerable to disruption, and the refining infrastructure is limited. Interruptions, even short ones, can ripple into food shortages, stalled construction projects, and weakened defense readiness. By securing a guaranteed stream from Niger, Chad is not only plugging a vulnerability, it is securing a stabilizing anchor for its entire economy. Niger, for its part, is stepping into a new role, no longer just a supplier of raw resources to distant markets, but a regional energy provider with influence over its neighbors' critical systems. This changes the balance of leverage between the two countries. It turns Niger into a partner Chad cannot easily sideline and gives Niamey a long-term economic foothold in N'Djamina's decision-making. The true weight of this arrangement lies in its structure. This isn't a one-off shipment or a loosely worded understanding. It is the start of a systematic supply chain designed to be predictable, scalable, and insulated from the political volatility that so often derails Sahelian commerce. The diesel will move not just along existing roads but through a planned cross-border pipeline that is already on the table. Once built, this pipeline will cut transportation times dramatically, reduce fuel losses from overland trucking, and slash the costs associated with moving fuel across vast stretches of desert. And this is where the deal becomes strategic. A pipeline is not just a physical link, it's a form of interdependence. Pipelines require security, maintenance, and constant communication between the countries they connect. That means this energy pact forces Niger and Chad to coordinate at levels that go beyond a handshake or occasional meeting. They will have to integrate parts of their security apparatus to protect it from sabotage. They will have to align trade policies to ensure an uninterrupted flow. They will have to share technical expertise to keep the infrastructure operational. Moreover, the diesel agreement has a multiplier effect. Cheap, reliable energy means factories can run at full capacity. Transport fleets can operate without costly delays, and agricultural mechanization can expand without fear of fuel shortages. In a region where the cost of energy often determines the ceiling of industrial growth, this pact effectively raises that ceiling for Chad while creating a steady market for Niger's production. Critically, the diesel supply also ties into the wider ambitions hinted at in the rest of the Cooperation Pact. Energy stability is what allows trade reforms to deliver actual goods across borders. It is what makes new highways more than just empty roads, and it is what ensures digital infrastructure can be powered and maintained even in remote outposts. Without reliable fuel, the rest of the agreement risks being a paper vision. With it, the framework gains a working engine. But there's a political layer too. Fuel supply deals can become tools of diplomacy and pressure. If relations sour, control over energy flows can be wielded as a bargaining chip. Both sides are well aware of this, which makes the inclusion of the diesel pact a signal of trust, as much as it is a calculation of mutual need. For now, it represents alignment. In the long run, it will test the durability of that trust. And so, the diesel deal is not merely about keeping engines running. It's about building a shared infrastructure of dependency, stability, and influence. Yet if energy is the engine of this pact, it still needs a driver. That driver will be the mechanisms that govern how this agreement is implemented, monitored, and adapted over time. Which leads us to the next question. How will Niger and Chad ensure the machinery of their economic and political integration works? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. An energy engine, no matter how powerful, needs a system to steer it, clear rules, shared institutions, and an agreed framework to prevent it from running off course. That is where the Niger-Chad Grand Joint Commission comes in, and why its revival is more than a bureaucratic footnote. It is the central nervous system of this entire agreement. For years, the Grand Joint Commission had existed in name but not in function. Without regular meetings, it became little more than a dusty entry in official communiques. Now both governments are bringing it back with a renewed mandate to serve as the main forum for coordinating everything from trade regulations to cross-border project timelines. Its job will not only be to implement what has been signed, but to troubleshoot problems in real time. This matters in a region where delays, disputes, and shifting political winds can easily derail long-term initiatives. One of its priorities will be the overhaul of customs procedures. At present, traders moving goods between Niger and Chad often navigate a maze of inconsistent tariffs, unclear paperwork, and unpredictable inspection delays. These barriers not only slow commerce, but also create openings for corruption, where goods can be held hostage until unofficial fees are paid. Streamlining customs through uniform tariffs, simplified forms, and digital tracking would turn what is now a costly bottleneck into a fluid trade artery. The new framework being discussed goes beyond simply speeding up transactions. It is designed to integrate both countries' trade systems so that a shipment cleared in one country will be recognized automatically in the other. This kind of harmonization reduces opportunities for smuggling, improves tax collection, and makes cross-border supply chains far more reliable. For manufacturers, it means production planning can happen without the constant fear of delays at the border. For consumers, it promises lower prices by cutting the hidden costs of inefficiency. Supporting this integration is another institutional move, the planned opening of a new consulate. While embassies handle high-level diplomacy, consulates are the everyday face of international cooperation. They process travel documents, assist businesses navigating foreign regulations, and provide a direct channel for problem-solving at the local level. By placing a consulate closer to the heart of cross-border activity, Niger and Chad are shortening the feedback loop between policy decisions and the people they affect. The Commission's scope is not limited to trade and administration. It will also be tasked with synchronizing infrastructure planning. The economic gains of the agreement depend on transport corridors, market hubs, and energy lines being developed in a coordinated way. If Niger builds a highway that stops at its border, while Chad's connecting road lags for years, the entire route's potential is wasted. The Commission's role is to ensure that investments align in timing, location, and purpose, so that every dollar spent on infrastructure delivers maximum regional benefit. Crucially, this machinery is also about policy alignment in a broader sense. In the Sahel, governments often adopt strategies that look promising on paper, but collapse when neighboring states move in a different direction. The revived Commission offers a space to debate and reconcile these differences before they become obstacles. If Niger decides to change its import duties or Chad adjusts its transport regulations, these shifts can be discussed and adapted through a shared forum rather than causing sudden disruption. However, building integration mechanisms is not just an economic project. It's a political gamble. Institutions like the Grand Joint Commission work only when there is sustained political will behind them. They require transparency, shared funding, and regular communication. Without those, even the most ambitious framework risks slipping back into dormancy. The decision to bring it back is, therefore, a statement of intent. Both nations are committing to not just building the engine, but maintaining the steering system that guides it. And yet, even the best-designed institutional framework cannot operate in a vacuum. It must be protected from external shocks, especially in a region where armed groups, shifting alliances, and geopolitical rivalries are constant threats. Which brings us to the next challenge. How will Niger and Chad safeguard this new integration against the instability that has undone so many partnerships before? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Protecting an ambitious economic and political pact in the Sahel is not just a matter of maintaining contracts and institutions, it is a matter of survival. The Niger-Chad agreement is being launched in one of the most volatile security environments in the world, a region where armed groups, shifting insurgencies, and cross-border criminal networks constantly test the durability of state authority. If the pact's energy pipelines, trade corridors, and infrastructure links are to function, they must first be shielded from the forces that have undone similar projects in the past. Both Niger and Chad are frontline states in overlapping conflict zones. To the west and north, Niger faces threats of insurgents operating across Mali and Burkina Faso. Chad, meanwhile, is stretched along multiple security fronts, from rebel movements in the north to insurgent incursions in its western and southern border areas. Neither country can afford to treat these threats as isolated. Instability in one zone inevitably spills into the other. That is why the security pillar of this pact goes beyond simple promises of cooperation. It envisions a coordinated defense strategy in which military planning, intelligence gathering, and operational deployment are interconnected. This means joint patrols along key corridors, synchronized surveillance to detect early signs of militant activity, and the integration of communication systems so that a threat detected on one side of the border can be addressed before it crosses over. In practical terms, this creates a single, fluid security zone for certain high-priority areas, rather than two separate national responses. An often overlooked aspect of securing such agreements is the legal framework. Militant groups frequently exploit differences in national laws to evade prosecution, slipping across borders where warrants, evidence requirements, or counterinsurgency statutes differ. The Niger-Chad Pact seeks to close those loopholes by aligning legal definitions of insurgency, standardizing procedures for extradition, and sharing evidence in criminal cases. This legal harmonization is as critical as any military measure because it ensures that captured fighters or financiers cannot exploit jurisdictional gaps to avoid justice. Equally important is the role of civilian security. Economic corridors and infrastructure projects are not just targets for insurgents, they are also magnets for organized crime, smuggling, and corruption. Protecting the new trade routes and energy infrastructure will require trained customs agents, anti-smuggling patrols, and specialized units to counter financial crimes linked to insurgent financing. This kind of protection is less visible than military convoys, but without it, the economic benefits of the pact could be quietly drained away by illicit networks. The protection plan also accounts for infrastructure-specific vulnerabilities. A fiber optic line can be disrupted by a single act of sabotage. An energy pipeline can be crippled by an attack on one section. To guard against such threats, the two countries are considering a layered defense model. Military units securing broader zones, specialized technical teams monitoring infrastructure in real time, and community-based networks reporting suspicious activity. The latter is particularly important, as local populations often detect early signs of trouble long before formal security forces do. Perhaps the most significant shift here is philosophical. Niger and Chad are moving away from a purely reactive model, where security forces respond to incidents as they happen, towards a preventive, intelligence-led approach. This means identifying emerging risks before they manifest, deploying resources strategically rather than in panic, and building a security culture that sees economic infrastructure as a national asset worth defending with the same priority as government institutions. But even with the most sophisticated defense strategy, security cannot be divorced from development. The pact acknowledges that economic opportunity is one of the strongest antidotes to insurgent recruitment. If the trade corridors create jobs, if youth entrepreneurship programs give alternatives to idle frustration, and if local communities see tangible benefits from integration, then the human terrain on which insurgents thrive begins to shrink. Still, the question remains. Security forces can defend infrastructure, and legal systems can close loopholes. But how will the people themselves experience the benefits of this deal? For the pact to endure, it must be more than protected. It must be lived. Which brings us to the final layer of this story, the infrastructure, connectivity, and human capital that will turn this agreement from a signed document into a shared reality. If the security apparatus is the shield protecting this pact, then infrastructure and human capital are the tools that will wield it into something tangible. For Niger and Chad, the agreements on roads, digital networks, and mobility are not side projects. They are how ordinary citizens will actually experience the pact's promises in daily life. Without them, even the most well-defended framework risks being invisible to the very people it is meant to serve. The most visible of these commitments is the acceleration of major transport projects. The Trans-Saharan Highway, long envisioned as a spine linking West Africa to the Mediterranean, will finally be integrated into the Niger-Chad corridor. This is more than a matter of laying asphalt. It is about redrawing the region's economic geography. For traders, it means faster, safer, and more predictable delivery times. For farmers, it means perishable goods can reach markets before spoilage turns profits into losses. For both countries, it means their capitals will be directly connected to a continental trade network rather than sitting at its periphery. But connectivity in the 21st century is not only about trucks and highways, it is equally about data and digital access. The fiber optic interconnection project embedded in this pact could be transformative. By creating a direct high-speed link between the two nations, they will not only improve government coordination, but also open new avenues for cross-border commerce. Small businesses in rural towns could tap into online marketplaces, schools could access digital learning platforms, healthcare facilities could share resources in real time. Reliable internet access also strengthens the very institutions that underpin the pact, making communication between agencies faster and more secure. Linked to this digital expansion is the broader Salkadamna Energy Initiative, a project that aims to expand power generation capacity. For citizens, the significance is straightforward. More consistent electricity means homes that do not go dark at sunset, clinics that can refrigerate medicines, and workshops that can run machinery without costly interruptions. For the economy, it means the infrastructure being built, both physical and digital, will have the energy supply to sustain it. Yet perhaps the most socially impactful part of this pact lies in the removal of barriers to movement. The decision to grant visa exemptions for citizens traveling between Niger and Chad is a radical shift in a region where borders often function as choke points. This change transforms mobility from a privilege into a default. Young entrepreneurs can test markets in the neighboring country without visa delays. Families divided by colonial-era boundaries can reconnect without the paperwork gauntlet. Students can pursue education across the border without worrying about expiring permits. Mobility, in this sense, becomes a driver of unity and shared identity. However, the pact doesn't leave mobility to chance. It links it with targeted human development programs, particularly for youth entrepreneurship. In a region where unemployment and underemployment are among the strongest catalysts for instability, giving young people the resources to build businesses is both an economic and a security investment. These initiatives promise access to financing, training, and cross-border mentorship networks, creating a generation of entrepreneurs whose interests are tied to the stability of both nations. Another key feature is the emphasis on anti-fraud and integrity systems. Large-scale infrastructure and mobility projects inevitably attract actors seeking to exploit them for illicit gain. The inclusion of anti-fraud measures, ranging from digital tracking of goods to enhanced auditing, signals that Niger and Chad are aware of this risk and intend to keep the economic benefits in legitimate channels. By closing the leaks in the system, they can ensure that resources reach the communities they are meant to serve. In essence, these infrastructure and human capital measures are the final layer that makes the pact real. They take the abstract policy statements, security doctrines, and institutional reforms and translate them into lived experience. A paved highway used daily, an uninterrupted internet connection in a remote village, a young business owner crossing the border to expand her market, these are the markers by which citizens will judge whether the Niger-Chad partnership is a success. And that is perhaps the most profound measure of this agreement's ambition. It is not content with being a diplomatic headline. It aims to be felt in the hum of a generator powering a new workshop, in the steady signal of a fiber line linking communities, in the open road between N'Djamena and Niamey. In the Sahel, where promises are often made but rarely delivered, the ability to transform words into visible change will determine whether this pact becomes a blueprint for regional solidarity or just another chapter in the long archive of missed opportunities. Will this pact truly transform daily life for people in Niger and Chad? Can the promised infrastructure withstand the region's political and security pressures? Let us know in the comment section. Will it join the long list of grand agreements that were never delivered? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.